welcome in. It's the Blue-White Breakdown, and we've got an odd couple pairing here again. That's Dave Jones, sweating profusely. I'm Dustin Hockensmith, not sweating profusely yet.
Thanks
Not
for
yet.
pointing that out. All right.
And we're talking Penn State football on the bye week, so we have a couple things we want to discuss about
But I
this.
know if you're going to say that, I'm going to condition it. Okay.
Okay,
I
yeah.
just took the trash down my 500-foot ski slope driveway, and I can't stop sweating. I'm one of those people like Gary Williams. You remember Gary Williams?
Yeah.
Sweatiest People Magazine's sweatiest man alive. Gary Williams.
Yeah, I didn't know there was an award or a yearly presentation.
A three-piece suit, and did.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like that. It's not pretty. Took a long time for me to get a girlfriend, but then I did. Anyway, once I start, I can't stop. And so I actually changed my shirt. This is a Penn State women's basketball shirt from like 2006.
Oh, nice.
Julia Freifrogel era. And I can't stop. Anyway, so that's why.
So last time Dave and I got together,
here patting his.
Last time Dave and I got together for a podcast, we talked for 67 minutes. I think
covered a lot of ground. Yeah,
and then and right before we pressed record for this one, we're like, never again. Then we started talking about sweat for 9 minutes, and we're not off to a great start, Dave.
Yeah, all right, sorry.
So the topics du jour. Number one, I am really curious what you think about Penn State's offense and the lack of rhythm to it, the lack of big play to it.
People know what I think. What do you think?
Well, I'm kind of dumbfounded, but then you look at it, it's like this team scored 30 plus points in 12 straight games, like all 5 this season. There'd be a lot of teams in the country who would love to have a lack of rhythm, but still score 40 points a game. I'm really confused about the running game, and
yeah, you know who those teams were? Let's trace back. Those teams were Indiana, Maryland, Rutgers, Michigan State, West Virginia, Delaware, Illinois, Iowa, and Northwestern. Okay, those.
Yes, noted.
The only decent defense in there is Iowa.
Yeah,
and that's it. So
yeah,
it's immaterial.
Right. How do you explain? So the running game is especially, and between the running game and the approach so far. And I get it that it's, opposing defenses are kind of making Penn State approach things a certain way, and that's fine. But it's a little confusing to not even attempt the big play and to not get anything from. Yeah,
I think it's this. Yursich and Franklin went through this schedule and thought, all right, we're going to get through the first half of the season unscathed. We've got a rookie starting quarterback. We've got a bunch of teams we should beat. The only way we can lose to them is if we hand them a game. We could lose maybe to West Virginia. We could lose maybe to Illinois. We could lose maybe to Iowa. And anything's possible in the Big Ten. You could even lose a road game at some place like Northwestern. We're not going to do that. We're not going to give them any ammo in order for them to beat us in a game that we absolutely shouldn't lose.
Right.
So there are 2 assets in that thinking. One, you don't force Drew Allard to do anything he's uncomfortable with. You say, if you're not comfortable with this, just check down quick, throw it away. Do that. 2, you don't show Ohio State and Michigan anything that you're going to do against them. Right. And the detriments are this. You're not oiling up your quarterback with his wide receivers. You're not really getting him used to deep, intermediate, and deep routes, especially in the middle of the field and in between the hashes. And I think they need that.
Yeah.
And you've got a quarterback that's certainly capable of doing it, but I'm not sure you got the wideouts right now. I think they've got trouble with developing intermediate and deep threats among that wide receiving core. And maybe they go to the tight ends and the tight end streak down the spine. I don't know. But right now, Keandre Lambert-Smith looks like a number 2 receiver, a good number 2 receiver, but I don't think they have a number 1. I don't think they have a field stretcher, a guy who could take the top off a defense. And if they did, I think they would have shown it. There's also an asset to showing what you can do. So the defense has to prepare for multiple different facets of your offense. So they got through the first half of the season. UMass is going to be the 6th game, which doesn't even matter. It's an exhibition. And I suppose you can work on stuff with them. But I would have done it against Northwestern. That is a defense that was incapable of handling them. They could have played 12 quarters and Northwestern might not have scored again. That's a team you can experiment against in a road atmosphere such that it is. And you got to get ready for the horseshoe here. So
Yeah.
I got a problem with it. I don't know. Here's the other thing. Their wideout room has taken hits since Taylor Stubblefield left, I think. And that was acrimonious circumstances. I don't know if they've ever been up to Ohio State standards since Josh Gaddis left. And Josh Gaddis wanted to be a head coach. He was probably more ambitious than his capabilities, but that's the way things are now. And I would probably have done what Franklin did and let him walk because he wasn't ready to be a coordinator. He tried being a coordinator at Michigan. That didn't work out. And Harbaugh just basically took over. So I understand Franklin's conundrum there. But the fact is, Ohio State has had the same wideouts coach basically for 5 years now in Brian Hartline, and he's now a co-coordinator. And it's Franklin's job to replace that guy. Stubblefield was a very good teacher of wideouts. He taught them how to run routes. He taught them how to catch the ball. And now I think you've seen a downturn, and I'm not sure they've ever stabilized that position. They've had what is it? 5 different wide receivers coaches in the last 6 years since Gaddis left.
I mean, it started with Corley with that whole sequence where then Franklin hired Jalen Sider, and Corley moved from running back coach to wide receivers coach. And I think a lot of people could have anticipated that wasn't going to work out all that great. Jared Parker was here for a year before he went to be the coordinator at West Virginia, and then it was Taylor Stubblefield who had 12 jobs in 10 years, and now to Marcus Hagans. So
and just to be clear, Stubblefield was the departure happened because Franklin was not happy with his recruiting. And like Prather at Maryland, he was at West Virginia. He's turned into a really good receiver for them, and they've got a whole boatload of them. When they go to Maryland, I think, what is it? It's November 4th. They're going to see a whole squadron of guys there, and Caden Prather is one of them.
Yeah.
And they got better wideouts than Penn State does. And right now, that's a big deal. It's not you can't play football the way you did 20 years ago.
Well, and then, I think when you got guys
I'm sorry, Dusty, what I forgot to say is that I don't think Taylor Stubblefield was happy with the NIL situation then. The money was not ready. And he contended that because you remember that horrific fight they had between the different NIL factions, which is ostensibly supposed to be outside the program, even though we all know it isn't.
Obviously, yeah.
And they were fighting among themselves before they solidified it, and that's the atmosphere that Stubblefield had to recruit under. So Caden Prather's saying, "Show me the money," and they couldn't show him the money. Is the way I heard it. So that has been ironed out, but now the point is Ohio State has had continuity in their wideout room all the way through them. Brian Hartline has not left, and he's been just stockpiling like cordwood wideouts every damn year and teaching them. And to me, that's been the difference, the main difference between these two programs. And it's not much. It's been like this much, even last year in the 43-31 game. But they haven't been able to stop Ohio State's wideouts when they needed to. They couldn't stop them in the 2018 game when they needed to.
Yeah. And, how many times have we talked about a lack of separation for Penn State's wide receivers? I mean, this is an ongoing theme. I mean, in your mind, is the jury still out on Hagans? Or are you ready to rule at this point? Does he not have the personnel?
In the middle of the season,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't. I'm just saying, I'm not blaming Higgins. I'm just saying there has not been any continuity in a very important room.
Yeah.
If guys are constantly having different position assistants in a room that's pretty important. I mean, Stubblefield was the only guy. What did they hung on to him 3 years? Is that what it was?
I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah,
It all blurs together, but
seriously.
yeah. Yeah.
And it's important to have continuity with those guys. Everyone has a
Yeah.
different teaching method, techniques. I mean, ostensibly, you're using the same techniques that work at the stem of routes, how to make moves, but everyone's different. And we've seen a couple of different three guys who've been four-star wideouts who can't catch the ball. I mean,
Yeah.
we've had three of them, and now the latest one is Malik McLean, who couldn't catch the ball at Florida State. Now he can't catch the ball here, and
But
I
man,
would say
it
with Stubblefield,
was,
guys did catch the ball.
yeah, it was, McLean was promising. I mean, I didn't take anything to the bank off of week 1, but man, did he look good against West Virginia.
Yeah,
Athletically, how he moved, that
yeah,
size, and that touchdown he scored was really impressive.
that was impressive.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of the story of the situation. Like, if you are going to lose a guy like, and Trey Wallace is a nice young player, but if you're going to lose one guy like that and have nobody else really step into a bigger role or command a bigger role, I think that's the thing. Nobody's commanded a bigger role between Liam Clifford and Caden Saunders and Dante Cephas and Malik McLean. None of these guys have commanded anything bigger. And if I like what Keandre Lambert-Smith has done, but I don't know that he's a dominator,
I
So
don't
I
think
think
he's a number one.
right.
And McLean is big and fast, and he was the guy if he simply caught the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And now it looks like they've given up on him.
Yeah, and
He's not even getting
and
targets.
yeah, so that is an ongoing thing, and I think to a certain extent, a quarterback helps alleviate those problems. A big arm quarterback can help alleviate those problems. It doesn't fix everything. Um, Theo Johnson down the seam is something I would love to see. Maybe that's
Mm-hmm.
something that they're holding back. I didn't want, you talking about, through 5 games and through the UMass game, holding things back. I didn't know if I was giving too much credit to the coaching staff for, being vanilla or what, but that was kind of my sense too, is that why do anything that's above what you need to do to get the job done now?
I got no problem with that. I just see these wideouts, and I'm thinking, I don't know.
Yeah.
To be completely fair, I used to think the same thing about Jahan Dotson early in his career, and then
Yeah.
he busted out,
Yeah.
and I was wrong.
That can still happen. It can still happen with some of
It
these
could
guys.
happen. It could
Yeah.
happen. Yeah.
So how does all this relate to not being able to really jumpstart much of anything in the running game? Is there not a lot of respect for the wide receivers? The approach from other teams is clearly there, but I still don't think that explains how there's no running room against Northwestern that got gashed by Minnesota.
Everything that an offense does is related to whether safeties get down in the box, whether outside linebackers cheat into the middle, and if they can, they will. And if you don't scare them, they will. And we've seen a bunch of defenses just dare them to beat them deep, and I don't see anyone doing that.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I don't see a lot of burst out of Nick Singleton the way we used to.
Yeah.
Katron Allen isn't really built that way, and now he's banged up with ribs
Yeah.
or whatever it is. And Trey Potts looks like the freshest back right now. He's got some tread on his tires still because he hasn't really worked that much. Even at Minnesota under Mo Ibrahim, he didn't get the work that, like Nick Singleton, I don't think is built for 21 carries like he got last week.
Yeah.
He'd be much better off getting 12 or 15 with a lot of touches on circle routes or wheel routes and
Yeah.
catching passes. He looks really comfortable out there.
That's been encouraging.
I don't think he's a between the tackles running back, and he looks weary and beat up. And I mean, it's hard. That's a hard job to be a meat and potatoes back. I think maybe Trey Potts is better suited to be that guy, and certainly Allen when he comes back. Trey Potts, was a very good recruit at one point. You
Yeah.
know, he was very well thought of. He ripped up a knee, and then he kind of went on the back burner, and they recruited over the top of him again with this kid Darius Taylor that Pep Boy got up at Minnesota, and the
Boy.
handwriting
Yeah.
was on the wall. But you look out for this Darius Taylor. I mean,
Yeah. He looks
he's
good.
and of course PJ Fleck, who I call Pep Boy, has to overwork every back he's ever had. He gives him 30 carries. And
Yeah.
he was doing it to Taylor. I think he had 84 carries in 3 games. And he's not built for that. He's kind of he reminds you of um, the Rutgers back with the Chiefs, Isaiah Pacheco.
Pacheco. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a really, really good back. Um, I just don't know if anyone is equipped these days to carry that kind of load. This is
It's
not the days of
yeah.
Bill Mallory and George Perlis anymore. Where
Football's evolved away from it, and especially at the college level,
yeah,
NFL teams don't want to see you give your back 30 touches a
no,
game.
that's
Nobody
over.
wants that.
That's over. And PJ Fleck is an anachronism that way. And fortunately, he had a back in Mo Ibrahim who could take it. But my
Yeah.
God, he took some abuse, and he
Yeah.
didn't get drafted. I mean, who
Right.
knows how much? Who knows if he could have been drafted if he wasn't used the way he was. He's like an old sedan now. I don't know if he ever had the burst to be drafted in the NFL, but he might have been. But
You've
he
always
used
been
up
an
his
old
whole,
sedan, Dave.
huh?
You've always been an old sedan. In your finest days of hooping, I think you could probably call yourself an old sedan. I don't
Yeah,
know
but
what you
that's
are
overdue.
now.
That's
I don't know
overdue.
what you are.
The knee went out right after COVID began. I really miss it. I miss it. You know what I'm doing now is disc golf. How
Oh yeah.
how
And
weenie-fied is that? But I really like it. Have
disc golf
you
and
know any
taking the
disc
trash
golfers?
out.
Huh?
Disc golf and taking the trash out.
You
That's
know any
it.
disc golfers though?
No.
Like this is a serious community. I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost as annoying as pickleball. I mean, where
Nothing is. Nothing's that annoying. Nothing is. I mean,
all right.
the belief that they have in their sport. I
I
mean,
know
I admire it.
they're
I'm annoyed
just
by it.
so earnest and pious about, and they're like Mary Kay people. They want to talk about pickleball.
Yes.
They want to tell you about pickleball. Yeah.
And everybody approaches it like they're a pioneer because they're on the front end of this wave, right? But I think that's over.
You want to talk about pickleball? It's like people talking about their fantasy league. No, I don't want to talk about your fantasy league.
Let me ask you one more thing about the offense, and then we'll move on. We don't want to get too far afield here. Okay, so let's just say for a second that the way that they're managing things now, where they're putting together methodical drives and it's double digit plays, like the number of like 12 play 55-yard drives. Let's just say that that's the identity. Does that work? Michigan and Ohio State. I mean, none of what Penn State has done to
Only
this point.
if you have an overpowering offensive line.
Right.
They don't.
Right.
I think Michigan has the closest thing to it. They look like a Joe Moore offensive line at Nebraska. What they did to Nebraska is what Penn State would have liked to have done at Northwestern, but didn't. If you were going to do that to somebody, you could do it to Northwestern, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Northwestern equals Nebraska. Well, Michigan did it at Nebraska. They just road graded them. 260 rushing yards. That's not Penn State's identity. So no.
And I'll tell you what, I mean, between Northwestern and Illinois too, Illinois was inexplicably bad defensively, but found themselves against Penn State. Northwestern got torched by Minnesota, but they found themselves against Penn State. You know, how many other defenses are going to find themselves against Penn State before the end of the season?
Look, I think what Yursich did against Iowa is really smart and really admirable, because that is a defense that was not going to relent. They wanted only, and Phil Parker does this to everybody, and that's why my infamous Iowa pick, that's why I did it, is I thought maybe he could pull it off on a rainy night against Drew Aller, a rookie starter, and sucker him into some throws that he shouldn't make. He's done it against really good quarterbacks who are young. He did it to Talia Tagovailoa. He did it to J.T. Barrett. He's done it to a lot of different quarterbacks over the years and beat them bad. He gives his Kirk Ferentz and Brian Ferentz so many chances to score with that defense, but he couldn't do it against Penn State because Yurcich would not take the cheese. He said, okay, you want to do that? We're going to keep going underneath. We're going to keep getting 4 and 3 and 6, and we'll play it your way, and we'll beat you your way. And it was fabulous. I mean,
it was telling that James Franklin after the game talked about don't get bored. Don't get bored with what's working. Don't be afraid to go back to what has already worked. And that's a great, I mean, that'd be a great title. If you were to write a book about that game, it'd be Don't Get Bored, the Penn State, Iowa story.
Are you going to write a book?
I'm thinking about it. Maybe it's Don't Get Bored, the Penn State, Iowa series.
I see a speaking tour. No, I'm just talking about you as a life coach. Don't get bored. You know,
don't get bored.
Walking around the stage very quickly with points.
You want to see sweaty. If I'm walking back and forth on a stage, that'll be sweaty. So going back to the Northwestern game, I know you have some thoughts on this, and I'm glad you wanted to bring it up. The 2.5 minutes left, Beau Pribula comes into the game, and he takes that what was called so confidently by the BTN rules analyst a fake kneel down. I didn't see it in real time. I didn't see it in replay. That's a big jab step forward from a running quarterback to make the defense believe that he's running a quarterback draw.
That's because that wasn't it. That's not what he was doing. I believe, I hope I'm not misspeaking here. I know, see, there have been so many really good rules analysts when the whole trend started. You started out with Mike Pereira, who I've heard has a back problem, so he hasn't been on lately on Fox. And then you got Gene Steratore, who's terrific on CBS. And Dean Blandino has been filling in at Fox, and he's really good. Those guys see things clearly. They don't misinterpret rulings. They don't go half-cocked on certain theories. They just call what they see and say, this is what I see. And usually they're right. And even when they're not right about what happens, I think they're usually right instead of the official who does whatever he does. But instead, the BTN, I believe it was Bill LeMonnier. If it wasn't, it was one of their other guys. It doesn't matter. Whoever it was, I'm not saying it was LeMonnier, but they have the BTN goes low rent on this stuff. And they don't have a particularly good guy. And I don't think he was ever asked to comment, was he? No. He just pushed his button and started saying, that could be that could be interpreted as a fake kneel down. There's 2:30 left. Who does a kneel down with 2:30 to go? Have we gotten that far into Gen Z where we don't want to trigger the opposite? Oh, no, it could be interpreted as if it was running up the score. We don't want that. It had to be a fake draw. That's what Pribula always does. B, he's a backup quarterback running that pass with Trey Potts, a third string running back. I put my backups out there. I'm not going to make them quit playing the game.
Right.
We're going to play football.
And that's been consistent with Franklin too.
Yeah.
And I think he was accused by West Virginia people of running up the score or whatever. I think he takes a lot of pride in having his twos do the job against your ones.
Your twos
I think he likes that.
Should be given a chance to do the job. Also, you're showing, we're kind of being contradictory to what I already said, but you are showing in that case something that Pribula can do other than what he usually does, which you haven't shown before to Ohio State or Michigan or Maryland or whoever, because he always runs that draw. He's never thrown out of it. Right. Now you're showing that on film. That's useful. And that's C. D, I'm sorry, but scores matter these days.
Yeah.
In the age of the college football playoff, do you think the committee members, God bless the committee members, but I mean, we've had some committee members who you kind of scratch your head and gone, or should these people really be on the committee? I'm sure they try to watch all the games, but in the end, they're looking at scores. They're looking at scores on screens. Scores matter. Scores do matter. And if you score again and make it 41 instead of 34-13, that looks better. It does. Penn State has a whole tradition back during Paterno, when they were good, of not running up the score to a fault. There was a game in 1994 that everyone remembers. I was down on the sideline. It's 35-14. They've basically just handled a so-so Indiana team. And that's in the middle of the 94 season, where Colorado and Nebraska and Penn State were all up top. Michigan lost on the last play to Cordell Stewart and Michael Westbrook in Colorado, and it really threw everything into a tizzy, because later all those votes from Colorado and Nebraska went to Nebraska, and they were first place votes for Colorado. At the same time, Penn State was, with their 2s and 3s, basically trying to do nothing against Indiana. Indiana threw a couple late touchdowns. The score is 35-29 at the end. It looks like a close game if you didn't watch it. And frankly, who in hell would watch Penn State Indiana at Memorial Stadium and the drowsy atmosphere? It cost them. I think it really did. Perception matters, especially uneducated perception. And I'm just saying the committee, not all of them are probably educated in game flow. They're not all that. At the end, I can tell you from being on the ends, I did the NCAA bracket seminar for the basketball tournament, and I found out how it is trying to parse the last few teams. We were there for a day and a half in Indianapolis, being taught by Greg Shaheen exactly how the process works. And I'm telling you, when you get down to the last, in the tournament, it's the last 8 or 10 teams. And this will be the last 3 or 4, I suppose, in the tournament. Yeah. And it's going to be more next year when there's 12 instead of 4. But you're parsing scores against like opponents. You're looking for any possible difference to differentiate one team from another. Scores matter. They do. Yeah. So, if you got the chance to score points with your 2s and 3s, you do it. Yeah. I got no problem with it at all.
So I just want to make this point, and then we'll move on to the last thing. We were going to talk about the Big Ten. I just want to ask you about Maryland, Ohio State specifically. That's it.
Yeah.
But if there are 5 good officials in America, how can you expect more rules interpreters, more quality rules interpreters than that? There's only so many people who are good at calling what they see. I think it's not fair to expect there to be very many good ones.
This is this. I mean, the Big Ten. Remember when? Who was that? De Niro. He goes, "This is this. This ain't something else. This is this." The Big Ten is always going to hire their own. And usually that's fine. There have been a lot of smart guys at the Big Ten. They usually used to have Dave Perry as their football officiating executive. Rich Falk was very good for their basketball. They've had good heads of officiating, although they haven't often had great officials. It's been catch as catch can. You remember Dave Whitford, right? Dave Whitford.
Yep.
There's been a dead ball foul. I mean, they've had some not so great officials, but they're always going to use their own,
right?
In that capability, and that's the bad. It's not the way to go.
Not a good thing.
Yeah.
Last thing. Maryland, Ohio State. Maryland goes on the road. We've seen bursts from Maryland before, and we've seen undisciplined play from Maryland and inconsistency from them, and games that they should win that they don't. Is this them breaking free of those chains, so to speak? Because I'll tell you what, I know they're on the road. I know they're going to the Horseshoe, but the spread right now is 19.5 for that game. I love that for Maryland. I don't know about straight up, but I love that point spread for Maryland.
Here's the thing about them on the road. Man, they've never been very good on the road. They've had moments, even against Ohio State at home, which they're now calling Bird Stadium, or whatever they call it now, the Shell. Have you heard that? It's the Shell.
It's like coming up with your own nickname. Like,
are you going to have your own nickname?
I'm not Dustin anymore. I want you to call me D Money. All right. That's lame. That's lame, Dave.
Hashtag
Yeah.
D-minus. So I wouldn't do that. I mean, the last time they were in there, they lost 66-17, and that was with Talia Tungavaloa. Okay,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
he's a better quarterback. I don't know if he's really a smarter quarterback. He is volatile, and they are volatile. I will
Mhm.
say this about him: last year at the Shell, they only lost, I think it was 43-31 to Ohio State, 43-30 to Ohio State. And that was a game late. It was 33-30 with, I think, 8 minutes to go.
Yeah.
They never really got a chance to get the ball back and do anything with it because Ohio State took it and drove 6 minutes and scored. But they have a better defense than they have had under Brian Williams, their coordinator. He has recruited some speed and some guys who pop people. I don't know that they're any more disciplined than they've ever been. They do
Yeah.
knuckleheaded things, but they have weaponry on offense, as they often do, as they always do. Roman Hemby's a very good back. They've got that Littleton kid who is a giant bread truck, who's a problem. They can attack you a lot of different ways with all their wideouts. They got they've got 3 or 4 or 5 different guys who Tungavaloa can throw to. Prather, we already mentioned. Jashawn Jones, who my nephew threw it to. I mean, he's been there forever. Corey Dyches. They've got a lot of good weaponry, and they got a kid, a Ty. Who was the kid? He caught 2 touchdown passes, and he's a tight end. He caught a couple of touchdown passes. I can't remember his last name. Last week. I mean, they just come out of the woodwork with guys. That's not their problem. They have to protect Tungavaloa, and they have to defend the run, because we talk about Penn State not really being able to get tough yards running the ball. Ohio State hasn't been great at it either. I
Right.
think they're vulnerable. Against Notre Dame, they couldn't get anything going until Henderson busted that 62-yarder or whatever it was. That was half their rushing yards in that game. Also, Notre Dame started to gash them a little bit with their own running game late in the game, and I think they were lucky to come out of that with a win. Kyle McCord didn't look very good until the very end, and then he made a couple of terrific throws on that last drive. They're vulnerable. I'm just not. I wouldn't touch that bet. I wouldn't, even with the 19, because you could be in the game and then they could lose by 25 very easily.
If you tell me not to touch it, I probably won't touch it. I mean, I'll bet it anyway. But if you tell me Ohio State's a slam dunk, I am betting the house on Maryland. I will absolutely say that.
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that.
We'll see.
I don't think that's a slam dunk.
If anything, it's going to be. I think you should assess the threat level of Maryland throughout the year, because it's going to fluctuate big time. They're not going to be this 5-0 version of themselves all season long. I think there's going to be some bumps in the road, and there just always seems to be. We talk about Maryland like this a lot, and then there are moments. There are moments where they become themselves again. All right.
Yeah, there's one other sneaky good game I want to mention.
Yeah, go for it.
And we're kind of monitoring these guys. Is Rutgers at Wisconsin, which will be a totally different kind of game. It's going to be a train wreck.
9-6.
Because Rutgers has played better defense. Their quarterback Gavin Wimsatt is starting to come along, and Kyle Monangai, their little running back, although Michigan totally shut him down, I think he can run the ball against a team like Wisconsin. So that is going to be a meat and potatoes game and should be interesting with Wisconsin. I believe they're coming off a bye. Yes, they are. So
yes, they are.
That should be interesting.
Yeah, that's another one to assess the threat level there with Rutgers. And if Rutgers has a quarterback, we haven't seen Rutgers have a quarterback since when, Dave?
Well, I'm not sure Wimsatt is the answer, but I think they've done a really nice job with him, limiting his mistakes. He certainly is a threat running the ball. Monangai is a load, that little guy. I mean, he is terrific. And they've got enough guys to score some points. Their defense is better. They don't do anything really well, but they do everything better. Shiana's starting to whip that into shape a little bit, to start to look like the the Mike Teal 2006 team with Ray Rice and those guys. That the running game and defense, and they're never going to win the division. Well, there won't be any division next year. They're never going to go a long way with that, but they can give a team like Wisconsin trouble. They can.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That's Dave Jones talking about the Big Ten here. Penn State got the bye. UMass coming up next weekend. Follow along, PennLive.com/Penn State football for everything that we're doing there. And the Blue White Breakdown can be found just about anywhere you can find podcasts. So there you go. For Dave Jones, I'm Dustin Hockensmith, saying see you next time here on the Blue White Breakdown.